This computer.
Work.
Well, welcome everybody. We're back with Reality After Darkness. This is your host Emily Styles and Mo Curls, and
Good evening.
we're here with Chris, and we're super excited because I've known Chris forever. We've got so much to talk about, right?
We do, yes. It's been a long time.
Oh my God. Well, congratulations on your amazing success on TikTok and your
Thank
fashion
you.
and all your videos. Amazing. I love it. You make me laugh all the time and you get me also like, oh my God, I can't believe, you were sharing so much about men's health and how much, men are not really valued in society. They're not really cared for the way they're supposed to, at least in my opinion. And so that's basically what we want to kind of dive into this evening, right? And Maribel had a really awesome, oh Mo Curl, excuse me. She had a really good point. She had a good point earlier, so I'd like you to tell me exactly what you were just sharing with me when we were talking earlier.
Yeah, I was speaking to Emily. I was basically telling her that I feel like for me personally, I've been around women a lot. So I feel that the women around me are always looking for like guidance or mental health. They're trying to find like the path or the journey to heal and stuff. And I wanted to know, Chris, like for you and like the men that you're around, how does that come off? Like, do you guys talk about that stuff? Is that something like that becomes a topic in your everyday conversations, or is it something that's really like not really spoken of?
Okay, so in two different ways. So when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to queer men, because I am queer and mental health,
Mm-hmm.
it depends on the guy. Like I've talked to guys where they don't really talk about that. They kind of don't express themselves in that way versus me who is really expressive about like my mental health and recognizing that I have struggles and trying to understand people. But when it comes to my friends, whether they're straight or queer, I happen to surround myself with people that talk about mental health. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if it's partly because I express the struggles that I have with things in my childhood, or if it's because it's a topic that we're surrounded by nowadays in terms of mental
Mm-hmm.
health. Um, so it, queer wise, it depends on who I'm talking to. When I
Okay.
was, and then straight world wise and queer friend wise, when it's not romantic, uh, we pretty much we talk about it. Not as much as you would think. I think someone has to bring up the topic for
Mm-hmm.
it to become a topic of conversation. But a lot of my friends are in therapy. A lot of my friends talk about mental health. A lot of them really try to find the struggles that they're having. And if they don't, they at least recognize it.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. I was always like curious.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
I mean, I work with some men. They're mostly straight men, but they're always just talking about sports and like being real masculine and all this stuff. And it's like, what about reality? What about everyday life? Like, it's almost like they use it as a cover. And I didn't know if you had a lot of exposure to that as well.
Yeah, I just literally like a last weekend I went to my best friend's release party for his summer spring like collection, and he's
Mhm.
straight, he's married, but the reason why him and I connect is because we talk about mental health and our struggles, and all
Mhm.
his straight friends do as well. One of them came up to me who had seen my series on TikTok and was talking about wanting to start like a group for a lot of his friends that are straight that don't really get a chance to talk about these things. Now, in normal conversation, it's not something that we bring up, like, oh, let's talk about our
Mhm.
feelings, right? But
Yeah,
when the topic does come up, we do share because we
that's
feel like
awesome.
we're in a safe space to do so, whether you're queer or straight,
Mhm.
right? But the
Yeah,
topic needs to be brought up.
absolutely.
We
I think
agree.
we all need to get in touch with that side.
Mhm.
Right.
Absolutely. So, Chris, thank you. I've known you for a long time, and since you were 20, right? About.
Yeah.
So, how old are you now? Do I ask?
I'm 34.
Okay. Wow. 14 years.
14
That's
Time
years.
is flying.
so I remember when I first met you, there was a lot going on, the dynamics at home. And
Right.
we always felt so bad that your parents, whatever happened with them. And then when you recently came out with the mental health thing and you started to share and open up with your lot and your stories, and I'm like, wow, I would really like to have him on here so that we can have him discuss that entire, like, that experience, and also going to therapy and telling your parents, because in Latino families, to your point, that's not a thing that they say we need to do. No, that's just for crazy people. That's only for
Right.
this or that. Like, they're so dismissive, and also they're so homophobic in our families, and they're so
Mm-hmm.
old school with this is how things should be, and like, you're gonna do what I say or you got to get out of here. And so
Right.
Mm-hmm.
if you want to, walk us through your experience.
Yeah. Well, you knew me when I was 20, and at the time I was dating your best friend, and him and I had started dating. I was in the closet still. And I came out because I wanted to introduce him to my parents. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and when I came out, I mean, I got kicked out of my house. And I struggled with like, after dating my ex for 8 years, we broke up, and I remember being angry and upset and not really understanding why I was so angry. And I think it took me till one day when I was at work, I had a breakdown, and I remember I ran into my supervisor's office, who I had been friendly with. She knew who I was dating because I dated him for so long that like it just becomes something known.
Right.
Um, I ran into her office and I just started like venting because I was trying to work on my friendship with my ex and it just wasn't working. And as I was speaking out loud, crying, I realized that it just wasn't my ex that I was angry at. It entailed my parents in some way. And that's when
Mm-hmm.
she looked at me and she was like, I think you need to talk to somebody. And saying that out loud, like talking about my issues to her in this breakdown, also made me realize I need to talk to somebody.
Right.
And that's what started my therapy journey with the therapist that I have now. Um, with my parents, when I started therapy, I sent them a text message, letting them know that I was starting therapy, expressing to them that I love them, that I care about them, that this doesn't mean that they were bad parents. It just means that I have certain struggles that I dealt with growing up with them. And I was specific about certain things, one of them being kicked out of the house, and that specific scenario and the things that were said that day that really hurt me. Um, and then other things, small things like, being bullied as a kid and my dad telling me that I need to just brush it off and keep moving, as opposed, which is, it's good advice, right? But like, that's something you tell an adult. As a kid, at the
Mm-hmm.
age of like 7 or 8, what I really wanted was my dad to just hug me and tell me he loves me, right? So like that disconnect of affection between my parents and I, feeling like a dog at times, like an award-winning dog, because they pushed me to be the best version of myself all the time. That I felt like if I wasn't good in school or wasn't great at something or everything, then I wasn't good enough for them. Because whenever I would bring a good, the only way that I would get something from my parents was if I brought them a success story, an award, a high GPA, anything to do with art, anything to do about myself was never talked about. It was always, what can you bring in the sense of like paper, right? Like A's, good stories from your teacher, awards, like so my struggle with my parents has been ongoing for many years, which is why I didn't speak to them when they kicked me out the house.
Right.
I wasn't allowed to, you know. Uh yeah. So those years that you knew me, I wasn't talking to my parents. My ex and his mom became my family. And
Right.
you guys too. You guys became my chosen family, my extended family.
Right.
You
Right.
guys were all that I knew.
Right.
Um, that's why I was always around.
Aw, and we took you in, as one of our own, of
Yeah,
course, definitely. And it was heartbreaking, right? Because even with other friends in our same friend group, we know who, I don't want to put her information out there, but
right.
also encountered the same type of thing, and then was able to mend that relationship with one of her parents years later. But it was just like, again, someone else is going through this, and we were just like, of course we have to make sure he's good, um,
Yeah.
it's devastating, and for anybody, and people are still struggling coming out to their parents and sharing things, and even if you tell your parents, they're still in denial about it. They still
Right.
don't want to, oh no,
Yeah.
no, that's not my, no, that's not my, or I don't want to know about it. And that's a lot in our culture and in our families.
Yeah.
They just sweep it under the rug. Like, no, no, my kid is still this person, right?
Hmm.
They still want to
Right.
envision us as this perfect, whatever, to what perfect the image of that they've created, right? Because
Correct.
their image of what they expect us to be, but it's not who we want to be and who we are.
Right.
It's like they want to live through us what they didn't get
Yes.
to experience, and it's not even what we want to do with our lives.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So after you started to make, some kind of progress with communication and such, and then you started going to the therapist, did they welcome the conversations that you were having like with the therapist? Like, were you able to sit down with them and say, hey, this is what I'm learning, and this is what I want to share with you guys? Or was that like, oh, we don't want to know?
So in the text message that I sent my parents, and the reason why I sent them a text was because I knew that talking to my parents, they're very inquisitive people. They need to know who, what, where, when, and why, and how. And I feel like when you talk to someone on the phone, it's a lot of emotion based. We're Latino at the end of the day, and I feel like the point I was trying to make was going to get lost. So in the text, I told them that I wasn't going to communicate with them until I felt comfortable. And I also told them that that is the one thing that I asked for from them, is to let me come to them and for them not to come to me. And they were respectful of that. The text was also a way for me to, because I knew they were going to have questions, and I wanted it to be set in stone through a text where they can go back to it and read what I had sent over again as many times as they needed to. But
Hmm.
that was answering all the questions they would ever have. Um, and so when I started therapy, uh, my mom and dad have become a lot more respectful about it. They ask me, how is therapy going? They ask me, how do I feel? Do I think my mom fully understands the idea of therapy? I don't think so fully. I remember once, sometime earlier this year, she was like, well, how long do you have to be in therapy for? Like, shouldn't you be okay? And it made me laugh because, like, I get where she's coming from. It's just someone who just doesn't really know and is trying to understand.
Right.
And so I had to explain to her. They do bring up the conversation. I will say, I just love that they're respectful about it, and that they're more self-aware, which I respect a lot. Because it gives me grace with my parents, which is something that I don't really get. I never really got from them. Is a moment to just breathe and exist. So they've been good about it. They have. I have not had an entire conversation with them about topics that I want to have conversations about, like the moment that I got kicked out and certain other topics about my childhood, because I'm not there yet to sit down and have those conversations. But I am comfortable enough to talk to them about the topics that I am talking about, very freely and openly. Because I feel like if I'm honest with them and transparent with them, it's a chance for them to grow also. My parents are not dumb. They're very smart individuals.
Right.
They've just never been exposed. And I think that
Hmm.
exposure and knowledge is power. So
Yeah.
Absolutely. Can I ask you, do you have any siblings?
I do. I have an older brother and a younger brother. We have really big age gaps. My older brother is
Oh,
9 years
okay.
older than me, and the youngest is 6 or 7 years younger than me.
Do
Yeah.
you feel that you all have the same similar experience with your parents, or they're all completely different?
I think similar and also different.
Hmm.
Similar because we know our parents' behavior. My dad can have moments of passive aggressiveness. My mom has a
Mm.
lot of guilt tripping that happens. Um,
Hmm.
they judge us based on our successes, not
Mm.
who we are as people. So in that sense, I will say the same, right?
Okay.
Different, in the sense of we experienced our parents each of us in different phases of their life. My older brother, when my mom was in her early 20s, me when they were in their late 20s, early 30s, and my little
Mm-hmm.
brother when they were in their late 30s, almost 40. So, you know, different phases.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
different attitudes. Yeah.
I was curious because my sister and I are 7 years apart, and I feel like we understand each other to a point. But I wasn't around for certain things, and they did kind of treat us differently, but there was a lot of similarities. So I was wondering, obviously we're all Latinos, if we all experience kind of the same similar scenario.
Right.
Now,
Yeah, I think so. Sure.
sorry, I was gonna ask, do you think that there was any narcissistic behavior or tendencies or any, what is it, that we were talking about last time too,
Uh,
immature
the um,
parents,
the emotionally immature parents.
emotionally immature parents? You think there was any of that to cut the,
Um, I can see emotional immaturity. I can see
Mhm.
that, especially from my father, because, and I get it. He grew up without his father being around. His father worked a lot, and so he grew up with his mom, but his mom was also not the most emotional. My dad was kind
Mhm.
of like the black sheep in his family from the way that he describes it. And my mom had a really tumultuous relationship with her father. So
Mhm.
she craved love and attention, and it was something that she did not get. Um,
Mhm.
so, you know, they grew up with not hearing the words, I love you. I will say, though, my parents have been very respectful of each other in their marriage, in terms of never cursing each other out. I've never seen them get verbally abusive with each other. No matter how angry they would make each other get, they never got to that point, at least not in front of any of us that I can remember.
Mhm.
Um, but when it came to us, I definitely feel some emotional immaturity for sure. I didn't hear the words "I love you" from my mom till like I was in my late 20s. It shook me on the phone when she told me I love you, and I was like,
wow,
I
Yeah.
didn't say it back because it was my first time hearing it.
wow, yeah, you
Yeah.
smart.
I have a similar, I feel that as well to this day. Even when my parents say it, I feel kind of weird. I didn't really
Yeah,
hear that. I don't even know how to receive it yet. I'm learning how to receive it still.
Wow,
So I could
that's
yeah,
imagine at 20, that's a long time.
yeah. Yeah. I remember being on the phone with my mom, and we were on the phone. I was probably like maybe 28 or 29, maybe 28 or 27. And I don't remember if I was in the car with my ex or if I was but I was definitely in someone's car. And she said the words "I love you" in English when we finished the phone call, and I just said okay, and I hung up because I didn't know how to respond to that. Like it was my first time hearing her say it ever that I can remember, and I was shook. I'm not gonna lie.
my gosh.
Now it's become easier hearing it because we do say it to each other a lot more often. So I feel a slightly more comfortable. But yeah, in the beginning, there was a learning curve for me to say it back. Yeah.
Hmm.
That's insane. I'm like, wow. Like I'm like, I can't imagine waiting that
It's real
long
life.
to
Yeah.
hear that, and
Yeah.
there's so many other people that have the same experience, or maybe they have never, or they have yet to hear it from their parents. So, for you to be able to share that, you're probably helping someone else out there that knows what that's like to maybe even, I don't know, did you crave that type of intimacy from your parents, that kind of emotional vulnerability from them and never,
Yeah.
I mean, did you want that from them? I'm
You
sure.
know, that's a good question. I knew that they always loved me. It's one of those things where like my parents made sure that I had a roof over my like they did so many other things that didn't say I love you in a verbal way, but they showed me that they did.
Right.
And so I always knew that
Mhm.
they did. However, I'm a words of affirmation person. I need to hear those words. But because I didn't hear from my parents, I spent a lot of time being okay with not hearing it from them because I was getting it from other people. Like I was getting it from my ex at the time. I was getting it from you guys. Like it felt so because I'm a very like verbal, affectionate person when I'm around people that I care about. And that's because it's something that I didn't grow up having. And so that's my way of
Mhm.
like making up for it, is letting people know that I do care about them, that I do appreciate them being around me. And so in a way, I did crave it. I guess I found ways of satisfying that need from my parents in other ways. Yeah.
Do you find that, okay, so like we always pick career choices that we think we want. Did you ever feel that some of the choices you made were geared more towards making sure they were pleased with your choices? Like, with school or anything you did in your youth. Did you do most of it because you wanted them to see that you were succeeding in something? You know what I mean? Because like I know
Yeah.
for me, I was always craving for my parents to say, wow, we're so proud of you. Wow, that's a great job.
Right.
You did that. Or like, wow, she has
Mm-hmm.
a business. Wow, we're so proud of you. And I didn't hear
Right.
that for so long that I was just like, damn, is anything I do ever enough? Did you ever
Yeah.
go that route?
Yeah. The reason why I work in healthcare is because of my parents. I mean, I remember them telling me that there was always going to be someone sick and someone dying, and healthcare would pay my bills. And so and it made it easier too because I knew that I was really good in science and history and biology and anatomy. So it felt like, okay, like because I'm a creative individual, like, and I don't know to what extent. Sometimes I think about this, how far I could have gotten creatively if I actually flexed that muscle. But because I grew up in a house where I wasn't really allowed to flex that muscle, I don't really know what my creativity extends to or what it could have extended to.
Right,
I'm doing all of that in my 20s and like 30s now, right?
right,
But yeah, I chose my career because I knew it was going to pay my bills, and it's something that my parents told me would pay my bills.
right.
And I mean, they're not wrong.
No,
Um,
absolutely not.
do I have a passion for what I do? And I said this on my TikTok. I don't have a passion for working in healthcare, but do I love the idea of helping people? I absolutely do. That's in like my true nature, is to help someone. And healthcare allows me to do that. So I love that part of my job. Um, but yes, my career is chosen because of my parents.
Yeah, and like I feel like that happens to a lot of people, or they initially go
Mhm.
into something and then they're like, you know what,
Yes.
I'm not feeling that, and they decide to do their own thing, right? Even if
Right.
parents disapprove, because it's almost like I got to prove a point that I can do something that I want to do and get away from
Right.
what it is you think I should be doing. Like the whole families are lawyers and doctors, and the other kid decides I'm gonna be an artist, and they're like, no, you can't be an artist. Like you got to be a
Yeah.
doctor, follow in the footsteps of or what we think is good for you.
Yeah.
So first I wanted to say I'm proud of you for still doing your fashion and all your stuff that you've been doing. Your TikTok
Thank
is
you.
amazing, with your over
Thank you.
10,000 followers now. Uh,
Yes.
and that's you. That's the Chris I see. I don't see the medical Chris. I see when you would tell us about, going to your friend's show and whatever. And I remember you always showing us different pieces and looks. And I was like, that's Chris. The one in the scrubs, I don't know that one too much, but I knew you were studying to do that,
Yeah.
I always saw the fashion, Chris, the fun and like very expressive. So how's that going?
Yeah.
Talk to us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've seen me be on social media for a while. I mean, I used to do YouTube videos in 2016, and then I started working my full-time job at the hospital, so I couldn't keep up with that like that. Whoever does YouTube, bless all of you, because it's so much editing, it's so much time. It really is like a second job. And then I was on Instagram and I was doing all my fashion stuff there. And then I went on to TikTok, and so you've literally seen me like try to be try to grow on social media in a way that felt organic and true to who I am. Um, but yeah, but I love the idea of, and I do social media because I've always felt like I have a story to tell, and I always feel like, I don't know, like, when you have like a gut feeling of a purpose that you have in this world. And I think that mine
Absolutely.
is to talk about my struggles as an individual and how I use that to express who I am. And the only way that I find myself doing that is on social media. Where it gets me, I don't have a plan for that. I don't know where I'll end up. All I know is that I am going with the flow of the world and life, and seeing where we go. But I have something to say, and I'm going to find a way to say it.
As you should. Heck
There you
yeah.
go. As you should. That's right. I was gonna ask you, Chris,
Sure.
when did you start therapy initially? Like when did that
Um,
whole time frame occur for you when you talked to that person? How old were you?
my therapy journey, I've been on my therapist journey for 2 years and some change now.
Nice.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, like I think that I am this very like self-realized person. You know what I mean? I think that
Hmm.
when you are pushed as a kid to think like an adult and to behave
Hmm.
like an adult at such a young age, and you're surrounded by all these adults, you see all these people have these grown-up conversations, you see them make their mistakes, and as a kid you absorb all of this as a sponge. I'm not saying that I was like this
Hmm.
really mature individual, but I am mature for my age. And I thought that I would never get any benefit from therapy, but the connections that I've made of myself and how deep those connections go to like family and the way that I view my family and the way that I view my brothers, is all through therapy. And I'm so grateful to my therapist. I tell him this all the time. I'm like, there are things that I've connections that I've made just by talking to him about random things in my life. And one thing will connect to the other. Well, it'll lead to my childhood, and I'll be like, oh, that explains why I view people this way. That explains why, and it's
Hmm.
a connection I would have never made on my own. Um,
Hmm.
no matter how many times I talk to myself, it's just one of those things that like talking to a stranger has really helped me too. You know?
That's amazing. Do
Mm-hmm.
you feel that going to therapy, does that allow you in a sense to heal and open up other creative avenues in your mind? So I see that you're a very busy individual. Does that allow you to pursue things a little bit more clearly or have a better vision of these things?
I think it does. I think it does because going to therapy has become like a venting space for me where
Hmm.
I have someone that I'm like no hairs on my tongue. My therapist, I talk to my therapist like I talk to my friends. It's very free. It's very kind of like uninhibited. Um,
Hmm.
and I want my relationship with my therapist to be that way. I don't want to have to filter who I am or think about what I'm gonna say. I just say it.
Hmm.
And being going to him has allowed me to not really think so much or overthink so much about my life
Hmm.
outside of therapy. It allows me to kind of get my thoughts in order much quicker and also
Yes.
to process things a bit better, um, in terms of like how I handle certain things, maybe not being so defensive, because these are things that I'm
Hmm.
recognizing while I'm in therapy with this person that once I leave, I have the tools to be like, you can't curse this bitch out. I need you to relax and pull it together. So at the end of the day, like I'm a kid that's born and raised in Brooklyn. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
I always say there is an inner Brooklyn Chris that lives and thrives. And when she wants to come out, she will come out. But there's a place
That's
and time.
right.
But yeah, therapy has allowed me to be more creative for sure.
So, yeah, I wanted to mention too, because I see you're happy you're a therapist. Emily's happy with her therapist. I'm happy with mine. I think it is important that we should mention that some people do go to therapy and they match up with someone and they don't have a good relationship, and that is important because
True.
you should be able to be free and open and be able to be like, I want to tell you everything, and so you're able to give me those tools. A lot of people get deterred when they get matched with someone and they feel like, oh, this isn't gonna work, but I think that
Right.
we do need to take the time to really like try different ones out because it's like
Yes.
relationships. They're not always going to work out. And that's
Correct.
important for people to know.
Yeah, I think
Don't
it is
give
really
up just
important.
because you have a bad experience with one.
Correct. You need to shop around for your therapist. You need to find a therapist that you feel seen and heard with. I have a friend who goes to therapy, and he always says that he filters what he says to his therapist because he's slightly embarrassed about, certain things that he likes in his life that are private. Um, and he feels like because his therapist is a woman and he's a man, that she's going to judge his likings.
Mm.
And I told him, I was like, you need to shop around for another therapist, someone that you can fully be your most vulnerable self, because then then you have to ask yourself, is therapy really working for you if you can't really be your most vulnerable self?
It won't.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I
I
don't
feel
think
like, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I just don't believe that you're going to get the most out of it if you're not vulnerable and you're not opening up. Because how do they know the deep rooted things that you have to work on if you don't open up?
Right.
I tell
Right.
people all the time, I'm like, well, what is it doing for you? If you're not being vulnerable, you're not telling them what you're really dealing. What are your triggers? What makes you sad? What makes you cry? What makes you angry? Like, you got to tell them what happened in your childhood that maybe is causing something now to happen in
Yeah.
your life, or
Right.
reoccurring patterns and cycles that you think are not there. And people are telling you, like, hey, there's something going on. You need to get that taken care of, you know?
Agreed. I
Mm-hmm.
agree. I agree. You make a very fair point. And
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with the same thing. I definitely do think my therapist is Latino and is queer. And that was very important for
Mm-hmm.
me because I don't think that I know that I can't be my full self with someone who is straight and white. It just wouldn't make sense for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like me trying to
Right.
explain eating sardines out of a can because my parents bought a house to a middle class white person, or trying to talk about my queer experience as a Latino man to a white person who is straight, it just wouldn't make sense. Like I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
have to explain my experience to you first for you to
Mm-hmm.
then try to understand. With someone who's queer and Latino, for me, it's like I just have to speak and you get it because you're queer
Right.
and you're also Latino. So it's things that I needed and looked for in my therapist um, that were important for me. And I think that's what's helped kind of feel my most authentic and vulnerable self around them too.
Oh, absolutely.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
How's your relationship now with your parents? I love the post with the ILY with your dad.
Thank
I love
you.
that. That was the cutest. And I saw someone wrote that they got emotional, one of our mutual friends. And I was like, oh my God, it was really sweet. Like, that must have been really nice to see, right?
Yeah, my relationship with my parents is a lot better. It's not perfect, but they, like I said, have given me grace and are really, really listening to me being in therapy. My parents have also recognized the mistakes that they've made in certain parts of my childhood. And I think they're understanding that they're human and that people make mistakes. Is it your intention to fuck up as a parent? No, you know. But do those things happen just because of age and we're human? Yeah, of course. Um, so I actually was on the phone with my dad before I came on here because he called me because for Father's Day, you saw the gift that I made him. The mug and the thermos, and I left him I wrote a handwritten card in the back, which I have never done for my father. I don't think I've ever given him I don't think I've ever put any thought into any gift that I've given my father because it's been always so hard with my relationship with him. Like when I say my relationship with my dad has always been professional, it's exactly what it is. It's always been so superficial, you know? So I put a lot of thought into those gifts and I put a quote in the back of the card, and my dad called me to tell me that he got emotional when he read it. And even my dad telling me this on the phone and having that level of vulnerability with me at the age that he's at, it just says a lot about where I am with him and how comfortable he feels talking to me about that. But I think it's because I've been vulnerable with him about my struggles with being in therapy and them, and I think it's we're both on the learning curve, but it's much better than it was even just 2 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that IOI, that's so sweet. When you said that, I was like, oh my God. So my dad's always telling me, so we have a spelling, it's weird. It's Yayu, Yayu. It's almost like I love you, but in like that baby voice, Yayu.
Okay. Yeah.
So my dad will spell it, and like that's always gonna be my thing too. It's like I love you, Yayu. It's not love you. I don't say I love you to my father. It's Yayu, and that's the
That's
thing.
cute.
So
I
when you
love
wrote
that.
that, I was like, oh my God, that's similar to my Yayu. And so I just got to see that. Um, but that's progress for sure. I mean, there's
That is,
healing all around.
Yeah,
you
I
know, and
think,
you might be spreading that to your parents. Look at how they're being receptive.
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know what to attribute it to. I think all I can say is I'm very transparent with them. Like if my mom asks, I'll tell her what I'm talking about with my therapist. Whether
Mhm.
she likes it or not, like I don't know, like my god, you know what it is? My godmother told me something when I was ignoring because my mom used to call me when I wasn't talking to them. Um, and I would hang out with my godmother a lot because my godmother is like my second mom. And she was always okay with me being queer. I think she always knew that I was a little, rainbowy. And so she loves me, and she would tell me, "Why don't you pick up the phone for your mom?" And I was like, "Because every time I pick up the phone, she would blame me about leaving the house. They for years used to tell me that I just left. I wasn't kicked out, and that was always a struggle for me to hear. And my godmother was like, the only way that your parents are going to learn about your queerness and about the life that you are living now is if you pick up the phone and talk to them and actually tell them about your life. Because right now, all they have are assumptions, are things and experiences that they've seen in their own life that they're using to judge your life. And that was one moment where I had with my godmother where I was like, woman, you're right. Like the only way they're going to learn about my life is if I am vulnerable and transparent with them and really let them know how I'm living my life and break down those stereotypes and perceptions that they have in their own head because it's not my reality. Maybe it's others, but it's not mine. And I think that's the reason why I'm always so unfiltered and transparent with them when it comes to who I am, even on therapy journey.
Wow. I mean, growth and healing all around. I'm happy you picked up for your mom. I'm picking up for them calls now is because of your making an effort and your godmother, right? Or your aunt.
Yeah.
That helps. Um, what was I gonna say? So what can we expect next from you, Chris? What are you up to now? I know you're doing your TikToks, but is there anything new, any projects that you're gonna reveal soon, or is that like no, don't talk about it?
I don't have anything in the works. I think that for now I am um uh, I'm just doing my TikTok thing and just having fun with it. I'm trying to build my content around being more I guess lifestyle based, if that makes sense.
Hmm?
Um and I feel the reason why is because I want to be, I'm not going to lie, I want to be more marketable. I want to talk about things that I like and do, but I want to be able to work with people that, I want to get to a point where I can work with brands based on how I choose to live my life. Not just on a paycheck, if that makes sense. I want to ride TikTok and my social media to see how far I can get. And where that leads me, like I said, I don't know. I have no idea. There's no like handbook for this. You just kind of go with the flow of it. Um, but other than that, that's literally what I have.
It's
That's
awesome. It
good
sounds like you
though.
got a lot of good things though. A lot of good things happening for you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And you can do what you love and not have to quit your day job.
That's
Your
right.
Right,
job, you know.
The
right,
sky's the
right,
limit.
right, right. The goal is to get to a place where I can do what I love and be my own boss. But till we get there, healthcare is here.
Well, you're on your way.
Forever and always. Yeah.
Yeah, there's always gonna
Yeah,
be out,
definitely.
but you're definitely on your way to it. You have such an awesome personality. I loved you from the very moment I first met you. You're always smiling and just such a pleasant person to be around. And so,
Thank you.
One quick question before, we
Sure,
wrap things up. I don't know how
sure.
far we're going with this, but when you decided to do therapy or to endeavor on that journey, what was your approach? How did you look for a therapist? Was there any resources? Was it word of mouth?
Hmm.
Like how did
So
you
yeah,
go
so
about that?
my journey with therapy, I went through my insurance. My insurance
Okay.
has a whole app where I can look for therapists or any kind of doctor that they cover.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went on my insurance app. I went through all the therapists that were in my area or near me.
Mm-hmm.
I got their addresses down. I looked at what they specialized in.
Mm-hmm.
On like Google, I looked at their offices, how far they were, what they specialized in, what their focus was. And the ones that caught my attention, I sent out emails to. And
Okay.
so when I would hear back from them, I would schedule an appointment with them, and then like a trial, I went there. The thing was, I knew I wanted to go to therapy, but I wanted to go to therapy in a way that wasn't going to cost me an arm and a leg.
Right.
Um, because as much as I love therapy, when it becomes something that's too expensive, it becomes a hindrance at some point,
Right.
Um, so that was my journey with it. I looked for 4 or 5 therapists. Like I emailed them. Some of them, because this was during COVID also, some of them were doing a lot of virtual stuff. I wanted to be in person.
Mm-hmm.
In person was important for me. I don't like something about having therapy for me in my apartment, in a place that I call my oasis, my home away from work.
Mm-hmm.
Felt a little too invasive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but my insurance really helped me with that. They like gave me a list of people around my area that took the insurance and gave me a breakdown of the copay and whatnot. And that's how I found them.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Some people don't know where to start, so I wanted a little insight on your journey with
Yeah,
that.
yeah, for sure. I mean, if you have insurance, that is the best way to start. And call them and find out what it is that covers and what they can offer you, and then you take it from there and you shop around.
And start interviewing them like you
Literally,
did.
yeah. I always tell my friends, I'm like, you need to find your therapist. You have to shop
Yeah,
around for them. Yeah,
Correct.
yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. You're what is it? You're interviewing them too. You know what I mean?
that
You
Right.
part.
want to know if it
Correct.
matches, if it makes sense. But on that note, I wanted to ask,
Sure.
because some people may not be able to afford, it might be out of their budget. So, was there anything that you do aside from therapy that helps you de-stress and, just kind of get into your zen? I know you mentioned that your place is your oasis. So, other than that, like, what do you do to help with your mental health? Because after all, we are discussing about, mental health in general for men.
Right. Okay, so I'm a loner at heart. I enjoy my time alone.
Okay.
Even when I have a partner, I still enjoy having moments where I can be on my own. And knowing and understanding that has helped me realize that sometimes my self care to decompress from work comes in various ways.
Okay.
But a lot of it is being on my own. So I love fashion. Sometimes going to a thrift store is a way that I decompress, believe it or not, as hectic as that might be for some people. But spending time alone, doing something that I really enjoy, something about looking at fabrics and textures, and it just, it's a distraction for me. And I leave there feeling inspired and feeling relaxed. But when I'm home after a crazy day at work, my apartment is always dimly lit. I always set a mood in my house. The brightest room in my apartment is my closet because I need to get dressed here.
Mm-hmm.
But every other room in my house is very dimly lit. There's always a candle burning. I always have 90s R&B playing. Something that's like lo-fi. All of that in combination really kind of sets the tone for the rest of my evening. And that is literally how I decompress. Sometimes I'll do like some skincare and facial masks because that also spending time on my own helps me do that as well. But my apartment for the most part is my oasis because there's always a mood set for me that is relaxing. Um and that is how I handle my self-care mental health is some brandy, some dimly lit apartment,
Hey,
and the candlelight. Yeah. You will never
that
come into
sounds
my
nice.
apartment and see the apartment. Yeah, it's I always use calm colors. My apartment is very neutral. It's very clean. It's very it just feels like a home, not like a place that I just sleep at. And all of that kind of has
Mhm.
helped me. I don't have strangers over. I don't like having people over my place. I think my friends have come over maybe like a handful of times because it's just other people's energy in my space. I'm like, this is really where I decompress and relax. I
Mhm.
don't need your,
Mhm.
nasty, I don't know who you are energy around.
I agree.
So I'd rather go to your house than you come here.
Right. Don't
Sorry.
do all of that there. And then you gotta sage your house. You
But
gotta
it's how I feel.
sage Palo
I
Santo
have
the
sage.
house, do all of
Yeah, I
that
have Palo
stuff.
Santo. I have sage. But yeah, truly decompressing for me is just setting a mood. That really helps me a lot.
I love
Yeah.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
because we hear sometimes people meditate or they do like a
Yeah.
little relaxation stuff, but that's part of it too. Your space should be an oasis. You should be able to light a candle. I love dim lights or no lights on at all. A nice candle. I'll listen to
Hmm.
jazz or whatever, meditate, anything. I even listen to rain and thunderstorms in the background because it just
Right.
something about water is just relaxing too. Those are things that people also, take up. So
I
that's,
agree.
your
Yeah.
space has to be your sanctuary. Now, for those people who don't have their own space where they don't live by themselves, I'm guessing
Right.
they're just gonna have to go outside and figure it out.
Well, true, but
Yeah,
also
you're gonna have
like
to put your feet in the grass or something.
Go
right,
for
right. Because sometimes, right, like for me, like even when I had a roommate, and I was just there today. There's a pier that I go to that oversees New York City, and when I broke up with my ex, I'm not gonna lie, I was going through it, emotionally, like I was a mess, and I would go to that pier and I sit every time I go to this day. It's been years now. I still sit at the same spot, and for me, it's like I have a connection with this particular spot at this pier because it's one of those moments where if I'm stressed out, if I'm going through it, that spot just brings me peace. Um, and when I sit there, I really know that I'm going to sit there and I'm going to think about things. I might cry, I might not. Whatever my body wants to do, I let it do. Um, but yeah, sometimes it's being out, like you find a spot. I don't know, like it's I think when you learn to listen to your body and learn to listen to yourself is when you really try to understand how to pacify yourself. And that is your true self care coming through. Um, yeah.
all right.
So, yes, I
Important.
agree with you, Emily. You
Self-care
might have to
is
walk.
important.
It is. I do agree with that. It is very
I mean,
important.
there's a lot of people that don't know what they like to do
Well,
because they
can I
don't
be
spend
honest with
time with
you?
themselves.
Right. I have a friend who came to this country. They're an illegal immigrant and they're struggling because they spent a lot of their life being around family. You know,
Hmm.
our countries, I think, as Latinos, we're always around family. We're taught to be around family. Our family is everything. And so when you come to this country and you're by yourself for the first time in many years, you really don't know what to do with yourself. You really are like,
Hmm.
usually you're surrounded by people, right? So to truly have to be by yourself for a number of hours, and when those hours become days, you feel like, am I depressed? No, Papa, you're not depressed. It's just that you haven't really understood. And I was talking to them today. I'm like, it's not that you're depressed. It's just that you have never spent time alone. And that freaks a lot of people
Hmm.
out. Being alone,
Hmm.
listening to yourself. I'm like, you might think that you're depressed, but it's because you haven't taken the time to understand that he's like, oh, so then maybe I'm weak. And it's like, it's not a strength or a weakness thing. It's a go with the flow thing. Some days you'll feel like you're at the top of the mountain and you have it together. Some moments you'll feel, sometimes on the same day, you'll feel like you're at the lowest, at the bottom of this hill. That's life. The way that you keep
Hmm.
yourself in the middle is how you find your love for yourself, right? And the only way you do that is by spending time alone and really finding what calms you down. How do you pacify your thoughts? That is the true self care. And I was like, stop thinking that it's a winning or losing situation. Just listen to your body and do things that calm you down. That's the only way you're going to learn. Um, and it sounds a bit harsh to say, and I'm not saying that depression is not a real thing. I'm just saying that you have to understand too where someone's life is coming from and that this is a new experience. And people do struggle with being alone. You tell one of your friends,
Yes,
baby, go have
absolutely.
dinner by yourself at a restaurant. They'll look at you like, I would never. It's like, baby,
Right.
sometimes you need to.
Yep, take yourself out on a date. I
Right,
love
You need
going
to
on
date
date
yourself. They
dates.
say
I
that.
right,
You
do.
should date
right.
yourself.
I go to the spa, I get a massage, I'm getting everything done. Nails and
Absolutely.
feet. Why? Because what we want from someone else, we should give it to ourselves.
That part.
Right.
That
The
part.
way, we
Right.
deserve it and we should be treated as such. So we do it for ourselves, and we also will not expect, but we should get the same from whomever we're with, whatever. But we gotta love ourselves. It's part of loving ourselves, because we were taught that that's vanity, right? Like a lot of times growing up, if you're like
Hmm.
religious too, they're like, oh, the self-love and all that stuff is vanity,
Right.
or you shouldn't do that. That's a sin. And I'm like, bro, you have to take care of yourself. You have to love
I
you,
mean,
because
we
You
were
have to. You're living
right,
in this temple,
right. And what did
right,
Jesus
you
say,
know?
right? He says, love your neighbor as yourself.
right.
So how can
Hmm.
you
But
love
another
your
thing,
neighbor if you don't love yourself?
that part. Sorry, I'm trying to find my chart right now. But the other thing that I wanted to say too is it's not for at least for my family is we were raised to be people pleasers. Like if I couldn't talk about my feelings, I couldn't talk about, how I felt about things. I was there to make my parents proud. That
Right.
was my entire life. And so that meant that I had to sacrifice my wants and my needs to put their own in front of mine. Imagine doing that to the age of 20. You get conditioned to really put
Hmm.
yourself in
Hmm.
the background.
Right.
And so when you feel like you have no one else to make proud, right? Let's say you come out the closet, whatever, you get kicked out, whatever the case may be, you stop talking to your parents,
Right.
then who really are you?
Right.
You don't know that because you've never had the chance to really figure that out. So you have to go through this process of like, who the hell am I? The only way you learn is by literally dating yourself and figuring that part out.
Yep.
Yeah, Latino families.
And
I
it's
think
scary. People should realize it is scary in the beginning. Like people just like,
right.
nah, I can't do this, or they try to find something else to occupy their time. But take the time for yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's important. That's how you
yeah,
start with healing, when you
Right.
start loving yourself.
I agree.
When I first got divorced, it was 14 years with the same person. It was like, now what?
I
You know,
know.
it was so hard to figure that out. So to your point, being by yourself is okay. And we have to learn, who are we outside of this relationship, outside of my family, outside of this job and career and all these other things. And I think too, we find ourselves doing things to keep our calendar filled, to keep ourselves
Hmm.
busy, so we don't have to think about our pain and whatever it is we're dealing with. So we just numb by keeping ourselves occupied instead of just being still and enjoying the
Hmm.
moment and living and loving
Or
our.
run, or we keep our calendars busy so that we don't have time to
That's
to
true.
actually get in touch with ourselves.
And take
It's
care.
like
Exactly.
running away, avoiding it.
It's avoidance.
Yeah, yeah, I
Avoidance.
agree with you. I do. Um, Something also is I that I always say is I've learned to let my body feel what it needs to feel whenever it wants to feel it. There are days, like for example, a little while ago, I broke a friendship off, and um, you have friendships that are seasonal that come and go, and when you realize that some friendships are not forever, um, I think that understanding that and knowing when to let go, it's important to know. But I haven't cried about it since that's happened. And I care about this person a lot. I still want them to have the best life ever. But my body's not there yet. When it'll happen,
Hmm.
I'm not sure. I might be on the bus and I might start crying when I think about it. But when it happens, I'm going to let it happen. I think sometimes a lot of us too were raised in households where we're told that we're not allowed to feel certain things, that if you cry, you're weak, be a man, or,
Hmm.
don't show your weakness. And I feel like for many years, the reason why a lot of us aren't really the most emotional people, it's because we weren't really allowed to be that. Um, and so when I feel like I'm gonna cry, if something happens and I don't cry at the moment, I know it'll come. And when it comes, I just let my body feel it and I just let it happen. Because it's healthy. It's healthy to feel these emotions and to let your body just let it do its thing. you know?
Right.
It releases a lot chemically and scientifically, yes, but also emotionally. It's just, bitch, if you gotta cry, let yourself cry. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing about holding it
We all
back.
need to cry.
Right.
Wanting
You
to
know, like you
cry.
want to jump up and you're excited, jump up and be excited about it. Like, feel your feelings and let them happen when they want to happen. Because sometimes our bodies react later than normal, and that's okay too, you know? But blocking them is not helpful either.
No, it's not helpful. I agree. And we are taught, don't cry, especially if we've lost a loved one or something. Don't cry. You got to be strong for so and so, your mom or your dad. And it's like, what do you mean? I'm
Right.
crying too. I'm mourning this loss too. What you mean I can't cry? Oh, girl, you
Absolutely.
know, you got to be strong for so and so. I don't know. I want to fall apart right now,
Mhm.
you know,
Right.
and
Yeah,
we're conditioned to like hold it all in, suppress it, that we don't know what emotions to have. We're like,
I agree.
you know, like, are we supposed to
And
be?
like he said about the being condition, like you, it's almost like you're on a delay because you don't know that you can feel like that. Like, oh shoot, I want to cry, but can I cry? And it can come off later on, and not at the moment.
Right, right. Well, Chris, my love, we've taken a good amount of your time. I'm gonna see when he comes
Thank you
back.
so much
Yeah, we
for
appreciate.
that.
Yeah, we
You sound
Of
like
appreciate.
a
course.
very busy guy.
Yeah. So how
Keep
can
up
our
all the good work out there.
definitely how can our listeners find you on social media? Share your TikTok
Um,
stuff.
sure. My TikTok and Instagram are at the Chris Garces. And those are the only places that I really fully share like my life on. Mostly TikTok. I go live about, well, I'm gonna go live twice a week on there around 6:30. It's kind of something that I'm trying to do. And yeah, that's how you guys can keep up with me.
Are
Yes.
you, when you're going live, are you doing any like specific topics? You just going live and going with the
um,
flow?
you know, for now, I'm just going with the flow of things. For now, I'm gonna try out. Someone recommended I try it out twice a week, so I'm thinking of going
Hmm.
on Mondays and Wednesdays,
Okay.
and then seeing how that goes. I feel like the more I get into the flow of going on live, I'm going to, you know, maybe find different topics for those days. But for now, it's just kind of freestyling it, just talking about a bunch of things. People on here ask me a bunch of questions, and I always get into conversations about healthcare and work and home life because I have a large Latino population that follows me around the same age range as us, also. So they ask very similar questions about mental health, and the topics range, but so it's always up for it's always open.
I love that though. I
Oh,
love that you're
nice.
doing that and that you're gonna do two times in a week. That's good because then you can get more comfortable with it and then you see where it goes. You don't have to know right now.
Right,
You just let it
right.
be, like you said before, organic. And that's where
Yes,
you've always been. You didn't want to force anything, just let it flow. And
right.
I'm excited to see what else you got in store. I'm very proud of you and thank you
Thank
so much
you.
for, hanging out with us for a bit. And
Thank you. Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for
And for
having me.
opening up and sharing your story. Thank you so much.
Of course. I always love opening up.
Love that, love that. So I'm going to stop the recording now. I'm gonna have
Okay.
to hold on.